So today I'm going to be showing you how I made this fully reversible Ariel and Ursula dress. This isn't going to be a full tutorial for this dress. This is going to be me showing how I took my Ava dress pattern, which is a basic pattern, and cut all the pieces out to make this Little Mermaid inspired dress. It should be very beginner friendly, and then you can go on and follow the tutorial for the actual dress. So let's get on with the video. So for this project you will want fabric with a 4-way stretch. For the Ariel side you will want purple, green, and then it's something that looks like mermaid scales. So the purple and the green I got from Jelly Fabrics, and the mermaid scales I got from Etsy. If you can't find any fabric like this that looks like mermaid scales, I have made a file available on my second Etsy that you can have custom printed for some mermaid scales if you can't find any. And then for the Ursula side you will need some lilac and some black, which again I got from Jelly Fabrics. And then I had this custom printed for Ursula's tentacles, which again is a file that I've made available on my second Etsy if you want to have it custom printed. I am going to do a separate video that walks through exactly how I have fabric custom printed, so if you're not 100% sure, but I have this done at Fashion Formula most of the time, and it is quite a straightforward process. So if you go onto their website, you'll see how to upload the file and then how to have it printed. It's very, very easy. So moving on to the pattern, which is my Ava dress pattern that you'll need. I've just gone in and cut all of my pattern pieces out of this paper, just because it's going to be easier to see on the white table, but also when you are making a project like this, you quite often need multiples of each pattern. So if you have some paper like this, you can draw out whatever you need multiples of. In this example, I needed multiple of the top pattern. So you can draw out multiple of them without having to keep printing them and keep having to piece them together and cut them out. So just having some, I think this is A3 paper, just having some bigger paper can be really, really handy for pattern making. So for this pattern, I've just cut out all my pieces in a coloured paper so it's easier to see. But you will have pattern piece 1, which is the high neck side of the top. You will have pattern piece 2, which is your tie side of the top. Pattern piece 3, which is your skirt. Pattern piece 4, which is the sleeve, and pattern piece 5, which is the pocket. So I'm going to start by showing you how to make the Ariel side because it is a lot more straightforward. So most of the pieces for this side aren't going to need any alterations, it's only the skirt. So all you have to do for this one is to figure out what colours you need each piece to be cut out in. So for the sleeve, this is going to be in your purple fabric, and you need 2 of these. And once you get to the Ava tutorial, you'll see that you're going to cut these straight down the middle. So you need 2 of your purple sleeves. For your pocket piece, this can be the same colour as your skirt, or for me, I actually decided to do the mermaid like scale print as my pockets, but you can do anything that is the kind of green colour of the skirt. So you're going to want these to be green, and you want 4 cut out of this one. And then for the tie top, this is also a purple one. And you just need 2 of these cut out, but you need them in opposite orientations. So you need to cut one out with the pattern piece like this, and then you flip it and cut one out like this so that you've got one that sits on each side. And then for your regular top, this is also going to be cut out in purple, and you just need 1 of these. And now for the skirt piece, obviously you can see I've got these triangles cut into the skirt pattern. So I didn't use any particular measurement for this, but I will measure this just to give you an idea of how big this should be. So this line is 11 inches, and then the line up the skirt is about 9 inches. So I'm just going to use my ruler and measure 9 inches up this side and just mark that in place. And then I know that this wants to be about 11 inches. This is honestly not important how big these triangles are. You can more or less just wing it. So that's one of the triangles. I'm going to do the same on this side as well. So I'm going to do that as 9. And then that as about 11. So then these two pieces, you can cut them out of your skirt. So this is your skirt piece, which will be green, and then these two pieces are the pieces that will have the scale print. Now, what's important here is that the rest of the pattern, when it was together like this, has the seam allowance added, which means when you cut it out, you cut it to this line. You don't have to add any more to the pattern because the seam allowance is already included. But any lines that you cut into the pattern like this don't have a seam allowance just on these new lines that we've created. So I like to leave myself a note on each line that I've just created to add a seam allowance just to the line that you have created. So exactly the same on this side. And on this piece. So what you would do when you're drawing these out is you would draw just regularly around this part, like right up to the pattern. But for any lines that are new that you've added, you just want to add a tiny bit of extra seam allowance when you draw it in. I'll just show you an example in a minute. So here you've got 3 lines that don't need a seam allowance and 1 that does. So for the lines that don't need it, you will just draw them in as you normally would with any pattern piece. You would just follow around the edges. Whereas where you've got this seam allowance, you don't need to do this, but you can be a little bit more precise here. I know that the seam allowance for the pattern is 6mm. So I can find where 6mm is and just mark it, just so that I can follow that line and then draw that across. It really doesn't need to be precise, but that's how you add your seam allowance. So your box is just a little bit bigger than your pattern piece. So wherever you are cutting into the pattern, you want to add this kind of seam allowance. So that will be everything in terms of the Ariel side. I'm just going to put an image on the screen that shows what pieces you should have in what colours. The only other thing that you will have to do before you can move on to the Ava tutorial is anything that you have cut apart the pattern, you will want to sew it back together. So when you've got the green piece of the skirt and then the 2 pieces with scales, obviously you will have that 4 times over, you just want to sew these pieces back together. Again, I'll put something on the screen that demonstrates that. Just so that you are back to the standard skirt piece with nothing cut out. So you literally just sew these back together. You put right sides facing together and sew that in place. And then moving on to the Ursula side, this one will be exactly the same for the skirt. So for the main piece, you'll be cutting this out in black, and again you will want 4 of those pieces. And then these pieces you will want the tentacle fabric, not really sure what else to call that, and again 4 for each side. So that's very straightforward because you can keep it exactly the same as the Ariel side. So I'll put that to one side. And then the sleeve and the pocket are relatively straightforward. So the sleeve you will want to in your lilac fabric, which again you're going to cut down the middle when you start the Ava tutorial. And then for your pocket, again, I decided to use the tentacle fabric, but you could use your plain black. And you want 4 of those. And something I forgot to mention for the Ariel side is you need to cut out 2 with this straight edge facing left and 2 with this straight edge facing right, so you can just switch it. If you're using a fabric with no right or wrong side, which if you're using the black you probably won't, you'll be fine either way, but you just need to have 2 in this orientation and 2 in this orientation. And then for the tops, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So I have a kind of sweetheart neckline cut into mine. I don't think I did this very precise the first time round either. So I'm just going to fold it in half. And honestly, I'm just going to guess where I want this to go. So I'm going from the armpit kind of area. Just like that. And if you fold it in half, you'll be able to get it a lot more precise for each side. So that's how those 2 pieces look. And we need to do the same thing. Swap that round. We need to do the same thing that we did for the skirt pieces, which is to add a seam allowance to any new seams that we create. So just write that there as well because it's very easy to miss. And then again across this sweetheart neckline. So when I cut this out, I would be following this line as normal because it doesn't need a seam allowance added. And again, with this top section, just follow it as normal. But with this seam allowance, you just want to draw it just slightly above where the line of the pattern is. And for this piece, just slightly below where the line of the pattern is. And again, to be able to take this over to the Ava pattern, you will want to sew them back together once you've cut them out. So this is quite tricky because they are 2 curved lines that kind of go in opposite directions, but it'll be easier to see when you've got your actual fabric. So you want to put them right sides together, sew along that line, and then when you fold it back up, you will be straight back to your regular top shape. I also forgot to say, so in this main top part, you want to cut 1 piece out in black, and then this top section you want to cut 1 piece out in lilac, and then they will go together like that. And then your final piece is your tie top piece. So for this one, you literally just want to draw across from the armpit and cut that in place. And then again, you want to add the seam allowance here and here. So for this one, you want to cut 2 in your lilac fabric, but you want to cut 1 in this orientation and one in this orientation. Again, you want to make sure that you've got a tie side for both sides of your top. And then for the main piece, this will be black. So you want to cut 2 in black, but again, you want to cut 1 in this orientation and 1 in this orientation. And then once you've cut everything out with your seam allowances, you want to put them right sides together, sew them in place, and then you will be back to your regular tie shape. And then again, I will put an image on the screen of everything that you'll need in each colour for the Ursula side. So then all your goal is to make sure that anything that you've cut out, and this goes for any pattern that you use, to be able to use a tutorial, you just need to get them back to whatever the original pattern was. So whatever you cut out, just sew it back together and then you'll be able to follow a normal tutorial. So then I will link on the screen and down below my Ava tutorial, and then you can go ahead and follow that one.